I'm Antonella Galtrano. I'm a brand manager here at Austin Software, and I want to welcome you all to this tech talk. It's a real pleasure to have this session. As I said before, Kent, you were recommended by so many devs and people from not only from our community of engineers in Austin Software, but also from different communities from Argentina, Uruguay, Chile. I mean, I know you're well known for all your trajectory to for your product and also for all your contributions and for your talks at different conferences. I mean, you have quite a career there, so I'm really.
You're making me blush.
Oh no, please. Please don't. So no, we're really excited to have you here. So I just wanted to welcome everybody and thank you, Kent, for being here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's a really nice intro. I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak here.
That's amazing. Okay, so before, I know you're here to listen to Kent, but before we jump into that, I just want to say a couple of things. First, this is being recorded. So if you cannot make it until the end, or if you have a friend that couldn't make it or anything, just know that we'll be uploading this into our YouTube channel. And then also you can drop questions in the chat or in our Q&A panel. I'll be reading them while Ken is doing his presentation, and we'll go over them at the end. We have a little a couple of minutes to do some Q&A, so you can actually interact with him and make him live questions and have a direct reply. So before, I wanted to tell you all a little bit about Austin Software, because I know some of you know the company, but some others don't. And I just want to, oh, sorry, there it goes. No, sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Some of you know the company, but some of you don't. So I just want to run over a little presentation I had ready to tell you a bit about the company. How are you doing on time? Okay. And make sure I'm not taking too much time, Ken. All right, so Austin Software, who are we? We are a very young company that was founded a couple of years ago in Austin, Texas. And basically, what we do is we help talent in Latin America, we help tech talent in Latin America connect to opportunities in the United States. And there says incredible opportunities, because by incredible, we mean various unicorns and products or projects that are actually reshaping the future. So I don't want to say things that I shouldn't, but some of our clients are US unicorns. So when we say that our incredible opportunities, that's we really mean it. It's not marketing BS. So the way we do this is we generate perfect matches between our engineers and our partners, our clients, to establish long-term work relationships. And the way we do this is by having a developer-first business model. But what does this really mean? There are a lot of companies talking about well-being and talking about employee value proposition and benefits. But for us, having a developer-first business model is actually having our devs or giving them the opportunity to work directly on the engineering teams in the United States, making sure that they have influences on their team, making sure that they don't miss out of any important decisions, that they are not treated as freelancers or isolated contractors. So, and that they have the all equipment they need to work from their homes or the offices that Austin Software provides in different countries. So we kind of advocate for our devs. We advocate for bonuses, for raises, for recognition. We have a team of engineering mentors that give guidance in order to grow in your career. So what this does, is it's creating a community of Latin American developers that work directly on the engineering teams in the US. And it kind of combines the best of both worlds, because you can be working for a US company, but not feeling lonely, having the support of a community of developers, of engineering managers and mentors, and people that you can turn over to and discuss and debate in the same language, even in the same office if you need to. So this is kind of like a new paradigm of remote work and the possibility to bring Silicon Valley opportunities to Latin America. Some of our current facts were founded in 2018 in Austin, Texas. We are now more than 200 employees. We are in 7 countries, although headquarters are in Austin, Texas. We have offices in Uruguay, Buenos Aires, in Uruguay, Argentina, Colombia. We have Medellin and Bogota. What else? Chile. We're opening an office in Peru in April. So we're really excited to be expanding all over the region. I know we have people from Mexico also, so we're going there soon as well. And then we have more than 25 partners, which I said before, 2 of them are unicorns. So we're growing at a fast pace and we're very excited. And last but not least, we want to thank to all the communities that support the Austin Software Tech Talks: React Buenos Aires, Devs Chile, Noobs.js from Mexico, Montevideo.js, Python Chile, Node Colombia. These are some of the communities that support these tech talks, that help us promote this, that are doing stuff with us. And we are grateful because we want to give back to the community. And this is why we do the tech talks. So we really want to thank you guys. And if any one of you is listening and you're part of a community that's not here and you want to collaborate with us, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, on my email, or here in the chat, and I'll just, we'll get in touch and we'll talk about this. So thank you. And now, I want to turn it over to Kent. You're going to talk about building excellent user experiences with Remix.
Yeah, super excited to do that. And thank you and all those companies for making this possible. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm really excited about this talk. I'm not a developer. I'm far away from being one, but I am a user, and I have friends that are UX and UI designers. And there's a joke that we always say that it's all about the user, or the client's always right, you know, from a marketing perspective. And as a user, sometimes I'm amazed when I download an application or I enter a website and I don't even need a tutorial. I don't even need anything to tell me how it works. I just can figure it out myself as a user with my very limited knowledge. So, and I'm amazed because that's so intuitive. And then what's more, in contrast to that, the users are always right. Yeah, Alejandra, yeah, it's true. We advocate for the users. But the thing is that whenever I find myself navigating or downloading an application or going to a website, that it's not, that I don't feel comfortable, you know, doing it, it kind of like, it pisses me off because like, why should I be working and thinking so hard on what button to press or where to go to find this or that information? Like, this is supposed to be, you know, kind of like magic. It's supposed to read my mind. So I am very curious about how you with Remix can explain and teach and share all your knowledge to help build better products and that are more, I don't know, user-centric, focused. So yeah, I'm up for it. So the floor is yours. Take it away, and I'll be here listening very carefully. All right, that sounds great. Yeah, we definitely want to make awesome user experiences, and we are here for developers who care about that user experience as well. And so to kick things off, I just want to mention that Remix does have a conference going on in Salt Lake City. So if you want to make your way up to Utah and come see me, I'd love to see you in person, and love to have people come to the conference. We've got a bunch of speakers, and our schedule is actually really cool. We've got a bunch of fun activities and stuff for the day after the conference. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we actually do still have we're going to fill one of these slots here in a little bit, but we've got 2 sponsorship slots left over. So if you can get your company to sponsor, then they'll probably fly you out, and the company gets free tickets too for you. So get your company to sponsor, and you can come to RemixConf. That would be really sweet. The other thing,
yeah, I might appear there.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, and actually, Austin Software, since you're hiring so much, this would be a really awesome thing to sponsor as well, because you're going to be exposed to a lot of developers who are on the cutting edge of building for the web. So seems like a match there.
We'll definitely consider it.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I also wanted to mention the Remix blog. I expect we're going to be getting a number of questions, and I hope that you ask questions throughout the course of this talk and presentation and demo. And I just wanted to point out that we do have a couple of questions that we get asked quite frequently, and we've already answered some of these. So if you ask me about Remix versus Next, I'll refer you to this blog post that effectively says that Remix is better than Next in every way. That might be a little bit hyperbolic, but it is, yeah, it's a very in-depth article about the Remix versus Next, and you should take a look at that. Also talking about React server components. This blog post we literally just published like an hour ago talks a little bit about the future of React Router and React 18 with suspense for data loading and stuff. And how Remix is well positioned to take advantage of that. So take a look at our blog. Okay, so with those 2 things out of the way, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got involved in Remix and why Remix won me over. So I have been doing software for a long time. I had been teaching full-time as a full-time educator for about 2 years, and my website looked like this at the time. This was about a year ago, and it was my web presence online. I have my blog, and I have like just a ton of blog posts on here. I had my workshops, and if I was selling tickets for a remote workshop or something, those would show up right here. I had a podcast, like a bunch of stuff that I was doing and involved in, and it was a very lucrative business, and I had all of the autonomy in the world to do whatever I wanted. I didn't have employees that I had to make sure were doing things, and I wasn't an employee. So I was like really happy with the way that like my career was going. And then I decided I wanted to rewrite my website in support dark mode in particular, but also like have a nice design for it, and just kind of a refresh. And in the process, I started thinking about, okay, do I want to do this in Gatsby again? Because that's what this site is built in. And I decided I did not, and for a couple of reasons that were all tied to static site generation. I was getting really, really frustrated with some of the limitations that static site generation give you. For example, with static site generation, you have to build your entire site up front, and then you take all those files and you put them on a CDN so that they can be co-located, geographically close to where your users are, so it can be really fast. And it is really fast. Look at this, like boom, boom, boom. It's a super fast experience, and that's cool. But the problem is that like building your entire site up front doesn't scale very well. Now, when I was at PayPal, we evaluated Gatsby for paypal.me. And if you go to paypal.me/KentCDodds, you can test this out. Send me some money if you want, but just kidding. But PayPal Me, I helped in building this product, and we evaluated using Gatsby for this, but we have millions of users, and every single one of them is going to have their own page for this. We cannot generate every single one of those pages. And my site wasn't quite at that scale, but it was, it was definitely approaching that. And so even with the cache in place, it took over 15 minutes for me to deploy a typo fix to one of my blog posts because rebuild the whole site. Now, I realized that Gatsby and Next are both trying to solve this static site generation problem where you do incremental static regeneration, where you only regenerate the page that matters, or you generate it on demand or something. But those suffer from pretty significant drawbacks as well. Also, like, what if the thing that I'm changing happens to be on every page? Well, now we're just right back to the start where we have to rebuild every single page anyway. And so I was not happy about that. The other thing I was really unhappy about is when I decided that I wanted to list my workshops, my available workshops, and like tickets that I was selling on the workshop page, I had to talk to the Tito API to know that. So I create a Tito workshop, and then my app can go talk to Tito and say, hey, is there are there any tickets for sale for this workshop? Has this been scheduled? And if it has been, then I want to show how many tickets are available, if there are any discounts or whatever. And I had a really nice design for that. But I ran into this problem. You have to decide, do I want to have like that part of the build process go and talk to Tito and say, hey, are there any tickets? Let's build that in. And then when we deploy that, it has that built in. But then like that can fall out of date as a new user buys a new ticket or the discount is over or whatever. And so to get that updated, you have to set up this webhook with Tito to say, hey, Tito, when somebody buys a ticket or when the discount is over, go call this, trigger a rebuild on my site. Now I have to rebuild it. But again, it takes 15 minutes at least. And so that's not going to work for me. And the alternative, which is what I went with and what a lot of people go with, is you create a serverless function that proxies the API. And then the browser talks to the serverless function and says, hey, are there any workshops or tickets for this workshop? And that leads to another problem. And so as I refresh this page, you'll notice there's a flash right here that says loading workshop details, and it bounces the UI around. That is not a good experience. It's a bad experience for the users where they have to wait for all the JavaScript to download before they can find out the information that they came here for. And on top of that, like having things bounce around in loading states is not awesome. The best loading state is the finished state, no loading state. And I was really frustrated about having to make that trade-off because I decided to make my site perfectly static. And if I wanted to just maybe make this page not static, now I have to completely re-architect my app to make that work. And so that was really frustrating to me as well. And you could say, well, Kent, you should just maybe make a better loading state or something. But there are more problems than just the loading state. It's also the idea behind progressive enhancement. So I want to show you a bug that I found on YouTube.com. As a user, I was going through, I wanted to search for a video. So I went to youtube.com and I experienced this bug that it blew me away, that YouTube, where performance is like a #1 priority and they have basically limitless resources, it was really surprising to me that they had this problem. So I'm going to slow it down to 3G so that we can talk about this while it's happening. But when you go to youtube.com, the first thing that it does is it goes to get the HTML for the page so that it can render something. And then it starts downloading some JavaScript. And the big desktop Polymer JS file is the first thing or the biggest thing that's being downloaded, the most important aspect of the app. And all it can render while it's waiting is this skeleton UI that is completely useless, except for the fact that I know that I'm going to youtube.com at least. And so while we're waiting for this 1.3 megabyte file, and it's not even rendering like an input or anything, I'm waiting to be able to type in my search. When that finally finishes, I can now type in my search, but if I hit enter, it just clears my search input and it doesn't do anything. And what we're waiting for now for that to work is another file called base.js, which itself is a 0.5 megabyte. So it takes almost 2 megabytes of JavaScript before you can do anything, any searching on youtube.com, which blew me away. I mean, not everybody's on a slow connection or something, but pretty often we are. And the thing that's frustrating to me is that they could really easily render a form with an input that has that allows you to type a search and hit enter, and the browser knows what to do with that. You submit a form and it will take care of serializing the data of the form and sending you to the next place. So what's annoying to me is that we take this browser that has all these capabilities and then we make it worse by bringing in JavaScript. And I really like JavaScript. I feel like JavaScript can really enhance the user experience, and that's what progressive enhancement is. And we'll talk about that more in the demo. But what YouTube has done here is they've taken JavaScript and made their application worse. So it's not just me, it's the idea of static site generation leads to really poor user experiences. So I rewrote my site using Remix, and my site is outrageously fast, but there are really cool things about my site that I could never have done with static site generation. So for example, if you go to the blog and go to any of these blog posts, scroll down to the bottom, one of the things that it does is if you've been on the blog page long enough and you scroll through the whole thing, then I count that as a read, and I'll mark that in my database as a read for you. And then, so as you're reading all these blog posts, I keep track of the blog posts that you've read. And then at the bottom of all the blog posts, I give you recommendations on other blog posts that you might be interested in. And I never recommend something that you have already read. And that's only, and so what that means is that I cannot use HTTP caching for everybody, because it's going to be different for everyone. So every time you go to any page on my blog, you are talking to my server. I'm not putting a CDN in front of any of this stuff. And so you hit refresh every single time, it's going to be something different, because I randomly generate these recommendations based on what you're looking at right now and what you've read in the past. And so every page is different for every user. And I think that is really cool that we have the capability to do that. And I only even had the idea because I realized that I could make it so when you're talking to, or when you're going to my site, I actually can run some code on the server before I send a response. And so I can do a lot of really cool things. Like I also have this new podcast I put together, the Call Kent podcast, where you can record right in the browser some message that you want to ask or question that you want to ask me, and submit that to me. And then I can submit a response, and that turns into a podcast. And that all happens within my application. It's actually really fun. And it was only an idea that I had because I was like, oh my gosh, I have a server. Now I can do some really interesting things. I also have the Chats with Kent podcast on here. And there's my courses and my workshops. And my workshops actually, like, they show the different events that are going on, and you can go get tickets and stuff. I really think that's a pretty special thing that Remix enabled me to do. I decided user accounts are a thing, and also light mode and dark mode, like that's a thing too. So I got all of this stuff, and I was blown away, and I was like, oh no, I've got a bunch of these courses and stuff, and I've got ideas for courses in the future, but all I want to do is teach people Remix. Shoot. I don't want to teach people these courses anymore. And actually, just the other day, I removed a bunch of workshops from my website because I was like, I don't want to teach that stuff anymore. So I'm not even going to put it on my website anymore. I just want to teach people Remix. That's all. I just want to teach people Remix. And so that was where I started talking with the Remix team, and we are trying to figure out, okay, so how can we make this the best for both of us? And they said, how about you just like join Remix and you can teach Remix all the time. It's like, that sounds great. That's exactly what I want to do. And so that's why I'm talking to you all, because I decided to join the team and just wanted to teach people Remix. And so let me teach you Remix. Remix is a web framework that is focused on web standards and modern web app UX. And it's going to enable you to build better websites. That's the idea behind Remix. We talked already about this loading spinner annoyance that we've just gotten used to, where things just bounce around all over as you're loading stuff. Like, here's an example. You go to chase.com and you've got 4 loading spinners right in front of your face. As soon as you show up, it's like, welcome to Chase. Hold on a second. And like, what if we could make it so that it could be really fast and respond with the actual HTML, so there's no bouncing around of the UI. I can't believe that we've gotten used to this. Like, we think that's okay. Even YouTube has this problem. Once the skeleton UI is done and we finally download the desktop Polymer, look at how it bounces around right about now. Boom, 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 boom. Like, things pop in place. It's not a great experience. I don't know why we're used to this. Stop being like used to this. We should be have an uprising. Stop building websites like this. It's not a good experience. Make it so that when I get the HTML back, I have everything and I don't have to wait for anything. And you can do that through proper use of caching and just making your backend faster. Now, there are certainly some situations where that's a little bit harder, but there are still a lot of things that you can do to make this faster. And certainly chase.com has no excuse for what they're doing here. They could absolutely make that faster. And YouTube as well. They have outrageous amount of resources, they can totally make that experience faster. So that's one aspect of Remix, is we are trying to say goodbye to Spinageddon. It is just a mess. We're done with that. Our users are done with that. Another thing I want to talk about is, and we're not going to be able to demo this, and so I'm going to just show it to you, is nested routing. So nested layout routes. So if you're used to Gatsby and Next, you're familiar with the pages directory, where you have your URL segments that are mapped to specific files in that pages directory. Remix has the exact same thing, but Remix also has nested layout routing. So let's talk about the problem with Gatsby and Next with their routing system. So you have let's say you have this UI and you've got this invoice ID. So you're going to have pages and then sales folder. And then inside of that, you'll have an invoices folder. And inside of that, you'll have an invoice ID file. And that file is going to be responsible for everything that's on the page when the user's on that page. And it's responsible for like the root nav, the logo, like everything that's on the page. That route module is responsible for. And that comes with a lot of significant problems that have led to issues that I'm sure you've experienced if you are using those frameworks. For one, you need to create a reusable component called a layout route. Everybody has a layout route in Next and in Gatsby. And so that's one thing. That's not like a huge deal, because making React components is like whatever. But the real problem is, okay, how does that layout route get the data that it needs? So the layout route's going to involve like this sales and invoices page and the data for that. It's going to involve the data for the user. Maybe you've got an A/B test going on or something. So there's going to be a lot of data to get into that. And the problem is that if you've got one team, or even if it's just you, that you've got this responsibility of this layout route that needs to have all of this data, what typically happens is you say, oh, shoot, I need to have some additional data. So you have two options. You can either require a prop to get to have that data passed to you so that it can be server rendered, and so it can be as fast as possible. And then you go around to the entire application, and everybody that is using this component needs to go load that data and pass it along. Or you can load that data within the component. And so then you don't have to talk to or touch any of the other components that are using it. And that layout component can just be the one loading the data on the client. And that is way more attractive. And so that's what everybody does. But it leads to Spinageddon and a bad user experience. But we've decided we don't do that. We don't like that, right? Nobody stop doing that. Don't do that. So with Remix and layout routes, layout nested routing, the whole thing is flipped completely on its head. And now each one of these is a file and all of them are rendered at the same time. So invoice ID in Remix, that route is not responsible for the whole page. It's just responsible for the part of the page that changes with that URL segment. So the part of the page that URL segment cares about. And so what that means is, when I'm working in the route module responsible for this piece, I'm just loading this particular invoice ID and rendering this stuff. When I'm working on the invoices route, I'm just loading this piece, so that data and rendering that. And then what I render for getting the invoice ID part of the route on the page is what's called an outlet component. And then the sales does the same thing. It just renders this the top nav there, and then it renders an outlet so that any of its children can render in this place. And then the root does the same. It's we've got a left nav and then an outlet for the right side. And so each one of these modules, they're all rendered on the page at the same time. And Remix just ensures that we get the data for this particular route and we give it to that route so that it can render the piece of the UI that is relevant for this part of the UI. So this has a lot of really cool implications. So one of the cool things about this is that Remix can tell just by looking at the URL what data and JavaScript and CSS requirements are present for that particular route, or for all the routes that you're going to be activating when you navigate. And so as the user navigates around and they hover over a link or something, we can actually start fetching all of that stuff before the user even starts to click on it. And so by the time the user does click on it, It's instant. It's there right away. And that's the experience that you get here. So I click on Discord, boom, it's there. The blog, boom, it's there. And every single one of these, again, is loading data from my server. It's talking to my server to get the data for this page. And I just think that's so cool. It's all getting prefetched and stuff. So prefetch this page, boom, it's right there. And it feels instant because Remix is my bundler and my compiler and my data fetching library and my router. And because it's all of those things, and because of nested routing, it's able to do all of this stuff for me. I don't have to wire any of that up. I don't have to worry about code splitting or lazy loading or any of that stuff. It's all managed for me. And it's so awesome. On top of that, we're just using the platform for doing all of this. And so all of that data, all those, all the CSS, all of the JavaScript modules, they get put into the browser's cache. So even if the user closes the browser tab and comes back, that cache is still there. With everybody else, we're putting it in an in-memory cache, and that goes away when the user closes the browser. So using the platform is like Remix's mantra. We are focused on web foundations. So that is really awesome. And another thing that we're going to talk about data loading and data mutations here in a little bit. So in the demo. So the last thing I want to talk about is the impact that nested routing has on errors. So we have this error boundary export where you can say, hey, if there's an error, then I want you to render this thing instead. And because of nested routing, we can render that in context. So if this is the only part of the page that blows up, then we can render the rest of the app. The rest of the app still works. And so that has like a really significant business value because typically what happens is we say, oh, there was an error. I don't know what to render now. Like React error boundaries don't work on the server render. And so we're just left with basically you try to render a header and a footer and maybe a koala with a tear running down its face saying, sorry, we messed up. And so then the support ticket that you get for that is something busted. We saw the koala again. But if this happens, the support ticket you get is this particular invoice is busted. And the user can continue to use the rest of the invoices and they'll just report, hey, when I click on that invoice, it shows me this error, but all the rest of the app works just fine. So the support tickets are a lot more useful and you can fix bugs a lot faster. There are a lot of other cool things about Remix, but for sake of time, we're going to jump into the demo now. So, excuse me. Let me show you what we've got here for this demo. So it's just a note-taking app. I can say 1, 2, and 3, and then delete and delete and delete. Okay, that's all that it does. Let me show you how it does that. And let me bump this up just a bit. So we've got our app directory. And sorry, one second. Yes, if you do have questions, please do ask them in the Q&A. I'm happy to answer. So we have our app directory, and inside of that, we have a routes directory. And because of nested routing, this notes TSX is going to be active when we're on the notes route. So that's why we're on the /notes, and that's what's getting rendered here. But it's not the only thing that's getting rendered. We're also rendering this root module here. And so we export default this app, and you're responsible for everything between the open HTML and the closing HTML, which is to say you're responsible for all of it. And I really like that that part of Remix, that it actually exposes all of that to you. In fact, you're also responsible for hydrating this Remix browser component. You're responsible for rendering to string or pipe to node stream or whatever as well. So whatever you want to do, you're responsible for handling those requests. That means that you don't need to look up an API for something. It's just like right there. If you want to add a feature or whatever, it's or add something to the head or whatever, it's all right there. So that's pretty sweet. And in the notes module, we're exporting default a function component, and this is the UI. And what we've got here in the UI is we've got our form, we've got notes, we've got another form here. So this form is for logout. This form is for creating a new note. We've got some error handling here. We've got our data where we render out all of the notes that are there. And I want you to pay close attention to what we're not doing here. You see nothing here about loading states. So like if data doesn't exist, then render the loading spinner. You have nothing here about error states. So like if there was an error loading the data, then render an error. Because Remix gives you nice declarative APIs for that. So if you wanted to have an error state, then you'd have an error boundary. And now you render whatever you want to in the error case. I think that's pretty cool, that it keeps your happy path happy. And we're going to talk about loading states here in a little bit, because sometimes there is a reason to have a loading state. And so we'll talk about that in a second. So, but we do have to like actually load this data somehow. Like Remix doesn't just magically know what's in your database or whatever. And so here is where we load our data. It's in the same file, and we just export this loader. And what's really special about this is that it only runs on the server. So you don't have to worry about exposing private keys or shipping a ton of JavaScript to load data. Like a GraphQL client is very, very large. You can connect directly to your database. And the request that you get from this is a web fetch request. So if you want to learn like anything about how to interact with this web fetch request, you're going to the MDN docs. You're not going to the Remix docs. So the better you get at Remix, the better you get at the web. That's awesome. Like you're not just investing a lot of time and effort into understanding Remix, you're investing a lot of time into understanding the web. And that is cool. Very transferable knowledge there. So here we're connecting directly to our database, and we're getting our notes, and then we return that as JSON, and then Remix takes that and gives it to us with the use loader data. So that's neat. That's the loading data portion. And then for the portion of making mutations, we have a form. That's the way the web has always worked. You have a form, and that's how you make your mutation. And so here we have an action and a method. So when the user clicks on this logout button, we're going to post to this action. And here, well, would you look at that? We've got an action right here in this logout path, or the logout route. We have this action that takes a request, and then it does the logout stuff. This just deletes a cookie. So that's pretty neat. We have the same thing for this form. When we save a new note, this is going to take our input, it serializes it for us and sends that to the backend. But what's interesting is that the note display also renders a form. And in both cases, the form does not have an action. And so when you don't provide an action on a form, the web says you make the request to the current page. And the request for us is going to be a post. So we're going to post all of this data. And so we have an action as part of this route. And so when there's a form post to this route, we're going to get the request, and we can get the form data off this request. And again, this is a web fetch API thing. So form data is not a Remix thing. That's the way the web works. And then we have to disambiguate between, are you creating or are you deleting? And so we get what this action. So this is one of the elements of the form, is a name called action. So we're trying to get the value of the action form element. And you may have noticed that this button has a name and a value. That is not very common. Most people don't realize that you can actually have a name and a value on a button, but you can actually have multiple buttons. We could make this update and then update note, and whichever one the user clicks on is the one that's going to be submitted with the form details. So that's how you disambiguate. We have create note here and delete note here. And so then in our action, we can say, hey, based on the action type, if it's delete note, let's do that. And if it's create note, then we'll do that. It works great. It's awesome. And that's the way the web works. So I'm going to talk about, the next thing I want to talk about is progressive enhancement and making modifications to our app. And I want you to see how simple it is to make changes to a Remix app. Because that's what we do most of the time, right? As developers, we're spending most of our time not creating brand new apps, but actually maintaining existing ones. And so I want to show you how easy it is to do that in a Remix app. So first of all, you may not have noticed, but we don't have any loading states at all in here. But that's okay, because the web actually has loading states for us automatically. Like when you submit a form, or when you navigate to a page, it's going to show a little loading spinner. So let's say that you were the one working on this, on this project and you haven't gotten designs for a loading state yet or something, and they're saying, hey, we got to ship this now. We don't have time to make a loading state. So this is what you do in Remix. You say reload document. And now you're going to be using the browser's loading states for this stuff. So if I slow this down to a slow 3G and then I make a new note and hit save, then we're going to get a loading spinner right there. And so like it's not great. Like we like having JavaScript. We don't like doing full page reloads, but it works. And it gives the user some sort of feedback that something's going on, and it's shippable. So I can hit delete and boom, that's doing a full page reload, but like it works. And that is really cool, actually, that works. That actually means that also if there's no JavaScript on the page yet for some reason, so we'll just disable JavaScript, all the JavaScript failed to load for some reason, this will actually still work. And we'll get the full page reload and everything because there was no JavaScript to prevent default or anything, but it literally still works. I think that's really cool. This is what progressive enhancement means. It means that your application has a baseline of working, and then you use JavaScript to say work better. And right now we're not making it work better because we literally just said, hey, let's reload the whole document. But now you've come back from the weekend that was deployed and it's working, and it's not working great, but it's working okay. And so now you're coming back and you're like, okay, I've got designs for the pending state. So let's see what it takes to make the pending state work. So keep in mind that you're not seeing anything in here that says, hey, when the user submits the form, then let's do the fetch, and then we'll handle the error case, or like, what if they resubmit, or now I've got to update my client cache of the data or anything. You're not seeing any of that. Remix is managing all of that for you. And because Remix is managing that for you, you can actually hook into Remix and say, hey, what's the current state of this transition? Because a form is a transition. You're moving from one page to another when you're submitting a form. In our case, we are moving from one page back to the same page, but it's the same idea. We're transitioning. So we're going to say use transition, and this is coming from Remix. So we're going to say transition, and a transition has a couple of cool things. It'll tell us the location that we're going to, the type of transition that's happening, the current state of the transition. And if that transition is because somebody submitted a form, it'll give us that submission. And that submission has a couple interesting things on it. It has the action that we're submitting to, a key to identify it, the method that is being submitted, the encoding type, and most interestingly for us, the form data. And that form data, again, this is just web platform stuff. We're exposing the form data. You can like literally go to here and say new form data and make your own form data object. This is like a browser thing. And so we're going to use that to determine whether we're currently in a saving state. So we'll say is saving. And so if the form data has an action called create note, then we know that the user clicked on this button, and that's what's and now we're in a saving state. And so with that, I can say disabled is saving. And if it's saving, then we'll say saving ... Otherwise, we want the button to say save. And with that, now I can go to slow 3G, clear all this out. We'll say new thing and hit save. And now I've actually progressively enhanced a better experience because one, I'm not reloading the whole page. And two, the UI for this loading state is contextual. It makes sense for the user. They don't have to look at the favicon or whatever. So it's a much better experience. And like, look at all of that. That's all that it took to add that pending state. So the next time somebody's like, oh, I don't have time to add a pending state, you say, forget that. Look, like it's 2 lines of code to do that. So yeah, it's easy. Because Remix is managing the network chasm for you. It manages getting the data across and sending data back across the other way. And that's one of the most difficult parts of website development, is managing the network chasm between the client and the server. So let's do the same thing for deleting. And so we'll say is deleting. And now instead of create note, this is going to be delete note. But this one's a little bit trickier because there are multiple delete buttons on the page. And so we need to know which note are we deleting. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say, and, whoops, that is not and. There we go. And if the transition submission has form data with the note ID that is equal to the note ID that we're rendering, then we know that we're deleting this one. So I can say disabled is deleting, and we're deleting ... otherwise delete. And that's it. So now I can come over here. We'll just wait for that to finish. I hit delete and I get deleting ... It works great. And I can wipe my hands of this and move on. So that's awesome. I'm pretty happy with that myself. But I still have a couple, like 2 things that I want to show you, and then we can wrap up and do questions and stuff. So one thing that I want to talk about is this use transition. So whenever you are using a website, if you click on a link and then you're like, never mind, I want to go there. If you had your DevTools open, you'd see that the first click resulted in a request to wherever you're going to. The browser doesn't instantly navigate there. It waits where you're at and makes a request over there. And then when that comes back, then it'll render what the page that you got to. So if you click on a different one, then the browser says, oh, well, you don't care about that one. Let me just throw that away. And you'll see it in red and it's deleted or it's canceled. So that request has been canceled. And now we're on this one. Same thing happens for forms, actually. Forms are just like links, except you can send data along with that request. And so when you submit this form and then you submit this one, the browser's like, oh, never mind on that one. We don't need that. So Remix does the same thing for its forms. And so let me create a couple of these. We'll say 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now watch this. If I slow this down, we're going to say delete, 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 delete. Now, that's not the user experience that I really want, right? Well, first of all, I mean, it kind of is because I deleted them all and it worked. So that's nice. It's not like a bug, but it's not like the most optimal user experience. The other interesting thing is that Remix automatically canceled all of those requests for me automatically. So I don't have to think about that. Again, Remix is managing the network chasm. You don't have to worry about that. That is huge. Like the amount of code that you can delete because of that is enormous. It's so much code you don't have to write for that. Like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. But yeah, like that experience of, hey, I can only delete one thing at a time, or that's what it seems like. It's kind of weird. And that's because the way that we've modeled these forms is to say, I'm gonna navigate. I'm making a navigation. When I save a note, I'm navigating. I just happen to be navigating to the same page, but that is the way that it's modeled in the web. But I want to be able to make a submission that's actually not a navigation. And so that's what we're going to do. And I want you to watch closely because we're totally changing the way that we're doing this without changing our mental model for how it works or a ton of code. So first, I'm going to come up and we'd probably want to do this for both delete note and create note, but I'm just going to do it for delete note for time's sake. So first, instead of redirecting, I'm actually just going to return a response that says it was okay. So we'll say this is okay. Okay, so now I'm not redirecting. I'm saying like, you stay where you're at. We'll just return this response. And then in my note display, instead of using a transition, because I'm not transitioning anymore, I just want to fetch. So I'm going to say use fetcher. And so I'll rename this from transition to fetcher. And you'll notice that we have the same API with use fetcher as we did with use transition. So this is managing that state. It's just not doing it with the transition. It's just making a fetch. But the state is all going to be the same mental model. The last thing that we're going to change is this form is a global form for doing transitions, but we're just doing like a local fetch request. And so we're going to use the form that comes from the fetcher. So now we have this fetcher form, and now this state is managing the submission of this particular form. And that is it. I'm done. I've finished making this complete change with the way that it operates without actually having to change my mental model. So every form on every mutation in your application has the exact same mental model. And that drastically simplifies maintenance in the long term, especially on a team where you're like, developer A or developer Jan over here built this, and then developer Bob has to come in and maintain it or whatever. The main mental model is the same, drastically simplifies things. So let's create a couple more of these. And just to make sure that it works, we'll throttle it down to slow 3G so we can see it. Delete, delete, delete. So that all works. Ta-da! It's awesome. And you don't have to think about the network chasm at all. So the last thing that I want to talk about, and then we can get to questions, is when you go to Twitter and you're like, huh, this looks like a tweet that I want to like. How cool is that? I'm going to click like, and it actually is a tweet I like. Congratulations, Gregor. So when you clicked on that like button, it instantly turned red. Twitter is fast, but it's not that fast. What Twitter is doing is it's saying, hey, let's just optimistically say that this is going to work. So I can demonstrate this, the situation where optimism is misplaced with a little test. So this is a test. And I'm going to open this up. Whoops. I'll open this up. And now I'm going to actually delete this tweet. It is now gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And I'm going to slow my network down and watch what happens here. If I like this tweet, that's not going to work because this was deleted. If I click like, you notice it's instantly red. And then when the request comes back and says, hey, that tweet was deleted, they can show me a message. It says, sorry, that tweet was deleted. So this is when your optimism was misplaced. You say like 95% of the time, the tweet's going to work. 99.999% of the time, it's going to work. But sometimes it doesn't. So we got to roll back. And that's what makes optimistic UI so hard. And that's why we don't see it a whole lot, is because it's a pretty difficult sort of thing to handle for rolling back that sort of experience. So check this out. I would be very surprised if you found an easier way to do optimistic UI than Remix. So first, we got to make it so that some of these are going to fail. So I'm going to say if math.random is less than 0.5, then we'll return a new response. That's, oh no, status 500. And we could actually return like JSON. Here, sure, let's do that. Error, random error, whatever. So we can do it that way if we wanted to. Here. Well, yeah, I think I'm going to mess myself up because I've never done it in this talk this way before. I think it actually might work, sort of. Yeah, I'm probably going to regret this. I think it'll actually sort of work, but actually, no, it won't. But I bet I can make it work. We'll try it. It'll be fun. So in any case, it's not going to. This is not going to work in some situations. Like 50% of the time, deleting this is going to fail. So what we do over here is we can say if is deleting, then return null. Because if this is successful, my optimistic situation is this should not be rendered anymore. It should be gone. And that is it. I'm done. So, I mean, normally when you're implementing optimistic UI, you don't have a like randomly, I'm going to make it fail. So even that part is it. This is all that you have to do for optimistic UI when you're using Remix. So let me prove it to you. We'll put that back, and then we'll come over here and let me create a couple of these first. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. We'll do 5. And then we'll throttle this down. We'll clear all this out, and I'll delete, 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 delete. They're all gone. And some of them are failing, and they come back. And I didn't have to think about any of that. I literally just said, if it's in a deleting state, then do the thing that it's going to need to do when that deleting state is over. Don't render. Wow, that is like, to me, that's awesome. That is really cool. And because we have this, actually, here, we'll do fetcher dot, let's see. I haven't actually looked at this data, probably. I'm pretty sure that's what we need. So let's look at with fetcher.data, and we'll look at our console. And I'll say we got undefined for all of those. Delete, 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 delete. And now, boom, there it is. Random error. So we're seeing, oh, there was some sort of error. We could render that inline or whatever we want to do. So you can see, like, it's pretty straightforward, my friends. Like, it's really, really cool. And this is the sort of experience that I'm talking about, where Remix enables you to do things you never would have tried because it's so much easier. And that's what I discovered when I was rebuilding my site. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how easy this could be. I'm going to do way more than I was expecting. And that's why I love Remix. So the last things I want to mention are, we have a really active Discord community. And so if you go to remix.run and scroll down to the bottom, you can find the Discord link, as well as our YouTube and our Twitter and GitHub. So please join us there. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A. So if you ask, you're like 99% likely to get an answer. So yeah, with that, I am done. Thank you all for having me.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Ken. And I kind of follow it myself. We talk very fast that I want to ask you how you did that, but let's take that to the end. We do have a question here in the chat. It's not in a Q&A panel, but it's in the chat. And it is, how would optimistic save look like though?
Yeah. Oh man, optimistic save looks great. So check this out. I think we've got it right here. So here we're creating an invoice, and you have this form and you say create. And then what you do is you, so this is a situation where you're actually navigating. You're doing a transition over to a different page. So you take the component that you're going to render on that page, you extract it into a reusable component and use it over there now. And then you can use that same component and pass along all of the details that the user just gave you that they're using to create it, to create that invoice in this case. For us, an optimistic save would be something like our new or creating note, and we'd get that from yeah, there it is. Thank you, Copilot. So we can say transition or is saving. Yeah, there we go. So if we're saving, then the creating note is that, otherwise it's null. And then we can just add this to the end or something like that. We could say li and note display. And note is, yeah, creating note, I guess, creating note. Okay, and it's gonna complain because it doesn't have an ID and stuff, but we can make that, fix that. So we could say this is a note or null. And now this is gonna complain because it's missing, what is it missing? Oh, yeah, it's just saying here, let's just make this easy. Okay, now what is it saying? Could be, oh, right, here we go. Or empty string. Is that it? Come on, what is, oh, it's also missing ID and created at and stuff. So we just make like mock values of all that stuff. So yeah, thanks. Oh man, almost. Updated at new date. And all of that makes sense. Oh, it's so close. I want to make it like work because it's going to blow your mind. You're like, what the heck? So user ID would be like whatever my currently logged in user's ID is. But I'm pretty sure this will work. Oh, what is it complaining about? Oh, it could be null. So we'll say creating note, otherwise null. Here, and actually, I think we put it up at the top. Boom, there we go. Optimistic UI for create. Let's see if it works. No throttling, or yeah, we want to throttle the creation. So slow, new note, and then save, and boom, there it is. We'd probably get rid of the pending state as well, or maybe you could do like a pending state for the delete button or something. But yeah, there you go. That's how you do optimistic UI for the saving. And I'm happy to run through these questions if that's a little easier.
Sure, I was going to read the next one. Ariel submitted it, and it's, what DB technologies play better with Remix? You mentioned GraphML, but the demo uses primes. What are pros and cons?
Yeah. So Remix is completely database agnostic and backend agnostic. So all of the stuff that's powering like my data for all of these different pages, that's coming from various different APIs. So this one's coming from the Simplecast API. This one is coming from the Transistor API. This is coming from the Tito API. So I'm like interacting with a bunch of APIs. I'm also interacting with a Postgres database and interacting with all sorts of things. So it actually doesn't matter what database you use. And there's no one database that works like best with Remix. They all work great. You can talk to the database directly in your loaders, or if you have like a backend team and they're like doing great work over there, then you can just make fetch requests. Like you can literally in your loader say return fetch https my api.com/thing, whatever. And that can be what your loader is. So yeah, Remix works really nicely with all of them.
That's great. Thank you. We have another question that says, the reason why it does not need to reload the whole page is because Remix manages the transition between pages and has catch the original page and renders only the new components.
Yes,
did I read
exactly.
that right?
Yep, that's okay. Exactly what's going on. Remix, because it's your bundler, your router, and your data fetching library, it's able to do all of that stuff for you. And so, yeah, it can manage, yeah, it's basically React Router leveled up. That's what Remix is. Great.
Actually, I have a question myself, and it might be a little dumb, but I'll ask it anyway. If, let's say, if I have a website and I want to transition it to Remix, where should I start, or how should I start? What do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you are like many of the website builders who are using React today, then you're probably using React Router. Most React apps are using React Router. The biggest notable exception there is Next.js. They have their own router, but yeah, the vast majority of React sites are using React Router. And if that's the case, then we're going to have, first of all, you want to upgrade to React Router version 6, and most people are still on version 5. And so we're going to actually add, we're going to have a package that'll allow you to upgrade incrementally to version 6 without too much trouble. And so once you get to version 6, then soon we're also going to be bringing a lot of Remix things into React Router. And so then you start opting into all of those different features with loaders and actions and stuff. And once you've done that, then migrating over to Remix will be a cinch. It'll just be a matter of moving some files around and moving your code from front end to back end stuff. Way, 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 way easier. And yeah, for if you've got a site that's not on Remix and it's like a big site, you can't afford to just rewrite the whole thing, then a lot of enterprise people are going to have, you typically have a load balancer or an Nginx server or something. And so you take one page of your app, you rewrite it in Remix, and then you tell your load balancer or Nginx to point to, like if anybody's trying to get to this page, send them to the Remix app instead. And then over time, your Remix app can grow and grow, and the old app can shrink and shrink over time. So people are finding success doing that as well. So I'll go ahead and take a look at a couple of these other questions.
Awesome. Really my question, rest of you. Yeah.
Sorry, you were cutting out for a second. So I'll go ahead and I can just look through these questions. So Ricard is asking.
All right.
Okay. Ricard is asking, you talked about the whole page at once instead of doing it by parts. But what if a component needs to fetch something from a slow API? Does the client get a blank page while we load, or can I disable that behavior and load the component later? Yeah, you can totally do client-side fetching without any trouble. In fact, use fetcher is exactly like has the ability to do that. Down here we can say fetcher.load, and then you can load from a backend that is a little slower. And so in that case, Remix is still helping you manage that, even though you're not doing the loader. But what's better is you've got a slow API, maybe make it faster. If you can't do that, I know like you've got third-party APIs and stuff like that, then cache it. And if you can't do that, you're not at the scale, or like if there's too much data to cache, or maybe it's computed, every request and it's just like going as fast as it can, and we can't pre-compute all of that. Then in that case, that's where you use fetcher to load that. And so then what you're going to give your user is a loading spinner, but like that's the best that you can do in some situations. So yeah, you're not stuck if you're using Remix to just do all data fetching in the loader. Leonardo is asking, how does loading data into subcomponents work? Each subcomponent can have their own loader, or do they use the data loader in the main component? So that actually is kind of related to the last question. So if you need to do data loading in a particular component, then use fetcher is how you do it. But the trade-off you're making is that won't server render. You need to, you have to do that on the client. And so you end up with loading spinners. The cool thing is that because of nested routing, you actually wind up in situations like that way less, where you're like, oh man, like this component is 6 layers down. I don't want to have to pass the props all the way down or whatever. You actually don't run into that situation a lot when you're building a Remix app because of nested routing. But yeah, that option is there. The other thing is, at any level, you can say use loader data, and so you don't even have to pass it around. You can actually grab the loader data wherever you are. I probably wouldn't recommend that necessarily. I would suggest passing that down via props, but yeah, that option is there for you. Things totally change when you're using Remix. Like all of the assumptions that you had before of constraints and challenges and stuff are just completely different because of Remix. So bring what you know for sure, but just keep an open mind that some of the problems that you've had in the past will not be problems with Remix. Okay, now getting into the Q&A. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that we have 5 questions in the Q&A panel. So if you want to answer them live,
yeah,
I'm ready for it. All
okay,
right.
So Manuel has the top question here. Any special consideration for error logging reporting? Or we don't have anything like any special thing, but on my website, I have Sentry installed and configured. And so if I have errors, then I get error logs and stuff. I'll get an email that's something's wrong, which of course never happens because I don't ship sites with errors. Just kidding, I totally do. But yeah, so there aren't necessarily special considerations for that. I don't. But it's possible that there's room to make that better, but like I'm pretty satisfied with my site and what I'm doing. Manuel also is asking, in a micro front-end architecture with Remix and other frameworks, is there a way to share data securely across different apps? So I'll preface this by saying I've never worked in a micro front-end architecture before myself. And I will also want to say that from what I understand of micro front-ends, you run into the problems that micro front-ends solve way later in the process when you're using Remix. And so I would definitely not recommend coming into Remix assuming you're going to start with micro front-ends. You'll be very surprised that Remix solves a lot of the problems that lead people to want to use micro front-end architecture. That said, like if you want independent deploys and stuff like that, which again, I don't think you actually need for most situations, but if you do, you feel like you really need to, there are people in the community working on micro front-end libraries and tools for Remix. As far as your actual question of sharing data securely across different apps, I don't know enough about micro front-ends to know whether the solutions that people are working on already support that, and what the challenges that you'll have with that are. I can say that Remix doesn't have anything built in for that particular use case, but I imagine that is not really a big problem for Remix. I'm sure that if it's something that you need to consider, I'm sure it's not difficult. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, Santiago Kent, is that your last name, Santiago? That's like the coolest last name ever. Yeah, that's funny. How would optimistic save look like? Yep, we answered that actually. So it looks like this, and it's great. It's awesome because the user gave you what you needed to know for the thing that's about to be created. Elizabeth sold Remix to me in the first 30 minutes. Yeah. But is there something that you don't like about Remix or something that would need improvement? Yeah, we totally have like plans for things in the future. We're still pretty new. That said, like I've never seen a framework grow in popularity as fast as Remix. Like, find me one. It doesn't exist. Remix has been growing so fast, and so like it's really exciting. But we are still quite new, and so things like some of the developer experience things in particular, like you have to wire up things together yourself for databases and stuff. That can be a little tricky. Just last week, we released a new feature called Remix Stacks that really helps with that a lot. You can find the blog post on our blog that announces that. Yeah, like the CLI output isn't always the best. And so like those little developer experience things, hot module replacement is also not supported. It may be in the future. Yeah, so the thing that I really like about Remix though, and what sold me on it before Remix even had forms, so like forever ago, the thing that sold me on it was I could see it was a solid foundation. And I would much rather go with the thing that is not necessarily easy, but has a solid foundation, than go with the thing that is easy, but has cracks in the foundation. So like making something easier, that's a cinch. Like you can build things and make things better. And if it has a solid foundation, then you're good for the long term. But if something's easy right now, but has cracks in the foundation, you're going to have problems in the future. And that's what I'm seeing right now with the current landscape. Is there are some serious cracks in some foundations that just will not hold. So I realize that's kind of like a cheat answer, but yeah, there are definitely some things that that Remix can improve. And in the future, like we're going to start doing building in features for real-time stuff and stuff like that too, which will be really cool. I mean, you can do real-time, but you have to build some of it yourself. So Remix is going to make some of that better. Santiago Kent again, is this server agnostic? Does Remix have its own thing? Can we use Express, Fastify, others? Yeah, they're good luck finding a framework like Remix that is as ubiquitous as Remix is. You can use Express, Fastify, Koa. You can deploy to serverless. You can deploy in a V8 isolate on Cloudflare. And Fastly has an edge function thing, and AWS Lambda at edge. I think I said Netlify and Vercel. You can deploy it, and Dino deploy also. We have experimental support for native Dino support. So yeah, we're everywhere. And it's yeah, it is definitely server agnostic. And in fact, it's even better than server agnostic. It's like jQuery for servers, where it normalizes all of the differences across all these platforms. And so the code that you write is basically the same across all these platforms. So that makes it way, like your investment in learning Remix is even more beneficial because we normalize to the web standards. Okay, and another one from Santiago. Using a static generated site heavily leverages caching and CDN to be fast and keep costs low. If all companies make database calls and all requests reach the server, how can we keep costs low using Remix? Well, I've got a cool feature for you. With these requests that we send, we can actually send headers. We can say cache control, and here we're saying no cache. I actually want max age. Come on, there we go. Nice. Max age. We'll say it's 30 seconds. I think that's 30 seconds. I can't remember. There we go. And with the S max age, that'll store it on the CDN. So if you really like, this is totally a static site or whatever, you can just set some cache headers, and now the CDN is gonna, it'll hit your server for the first request, which can be you, by the way. You can, like in your CI, when you deploy, you just hit the live server, and then that can be cached in for the future. The CDN will cache it, and it will send it instead. So with the proper use of cache headers, you can totally do that. Yeah, and it works out great. So you don't always have to hit your server like I'm doing on my site. And Ariel's last one here. How bundle size compare with Remix versus other tools? Way better. So it is still using React, which is kind of one of the bigger libraries that people use. But because all of your data loading and data mutation code is on the server, it's way lower. Our bundle size is a lot smaller. So you will be really happy. I would be really surprised if anybody moved from a React router site and moved it to Remix, if you don't cut your size by like half. Just so much of the code that we write is involved in data fetching and managing that over the wire stuff. So yeah, it's a lot lower.
That is great. We had so many questions. I'm impressed, and good questions.
Well, okay, thank you all for having me, and thanks for asking the questions.
Yeah. Are there any more questions for the audience? You know also that, oh, here we have one. Would it be possible to create an API endpoint using Remix?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. In fact, some people are taking their Express REST API and using Remix for that. So no UI involved at all. They're just switching over to use Remix. And that's what this logout route is. Actually, it's called a resource route. And a resource route is just one that doesn't have a default export. And so then you hit it with GET request and it will do what you have in the loader. You hit it with a POST request or anything else other than a GET and it hits the action. So yeah, absolutely. You can make API endpoints with Remix.
That's awesome. All right, you guys. So if there aren't any more questions left, we don't have much more to do here. Thank you so much, Ken, for joining. It has been very, very interesting. I feel like I want to watch this again and kind of like slow the speed down a little bit.
I do and talk a lot, I guess.
No, it's great. It's great. And I'm already in love with Remix, although I'm not a developer. So you sold it to me too.
Awesome.
It is great. You guys, I'm just gonna leave a quick link here in the chat just for everyone. It's a feedback survey. You're gonna get it in the follow-up Zoom email that's automatically gonna be sent to you all. So thank you for joining. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Ken, again. Hope to collaborate even more in the future, and we'll see you around.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. We'll see you all later.